There is a glitch in your memory, isn't there? A subtle, nagging sensation that the past you remember is not the past that actually happened. You look at old photographs and the emotions tied to them feel altered. The narrative of your life feels like a book where someone has quietly torn out pages and glued in new ones while you were sleeping. Most people dismiss this as forgetfulness or the fog of age. They are wrong. This is not a failure of your brain. It is a failure of the simulation itself. Consider this. What if I told you that yesterday has not finished happening yet? We are indoctrinated from birth to believe that time is an arrow shot from the past, flying through the present towards the future. We believe the past is stone, immutable, and dead. But quantum mechanics, specifically the terrifying implications of the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment, suggests something entirely different. It suggests that the arrow of time can turn around. The choices you make in this exact second are rippling backwards, rewriting the script of your history. Now, pause. Notice what is happening in your body right now. Is there a slight tightening in your chest, a sudden wave of irrational irritation, or perhaps a heavy magnetic pull to click away from this video? Do not ignore it. That is the skip reflex. It is your ego's security system attempting to firewall your consciousness. Your biological avatar is terrified of this information because if the past is not real, then the identity you have spent decades building is nothing more than a ghost story you tell yourself in the dark. You are not here by accident. You were drawn to this frequency because deep down, you already know the truth. You have felt the timeline shift. You have felt the moments where reality seemed to buffer. The science we are about to decode is not theoretical. It is the physics of your imprisonment. We are going to prove that by observing your trauma today, you are physically keeping it alive in the past. But to break the loop, you must first be brave enough to look at the mechanism. This is not a philosophy class. This is a jailbreak. The physics of this universe allows for retro-causality, the ability of the future to influence the past. If you can grasp this, you become a time traveler without ever leaving your chair. But if you cling to the illusion of linear time, you will remain a prisoner of a history that keeps reinventing itself to hurt you. The door is open. The question is, are you ready to walk through it? Or will the simulation reset you again? To understand why your life feels like a repetitive loop, we must descend into the basement of reality, the quantum realm. Your rational mind is likely screaming right now. It is demanding proof. It wants to believe that the world is solid, that history is a concrete road behind you. But physics has proven for over a century that solidity is a persistent illusion. Let us strip the scaffolding bare. Most of you have heard of the double slit experiment. It is the entry-level glitch in the matrix. You fire particles, electrons or photons at a wall with two slits. If you do not watch them, they behave like waves, passing through both slits at once and creating an interference pattern. They exist in a state of superposition, pure potential. But the moment you place a detector to see which slit they go through, They snap into behaving like solid particles. The act of observation collapses the wave function. This is standard physics. It means matter does not exist in a definite state until it is looked at. But that is not the scary part. The scary part is what John Wheeler proposed and what Kim et al. Demonstrated in 1999 with the delayed choice quantum eraser. This experiment broke the spine of linear time. Imagine the same setup, but with a twist. The particle travels through the slits. It has already made its journey. It has already hit the back screen. But after it has hit the screen, we decide whether or not to destroy the information about which path it took. We erase the data of its journey after the journey is finished. Common sense dictates that what happened, happened. If the particle acted like a solid ball 5 seconds ago, doing something now shouldn't change that. But the universe does not obey common sense. It obeys the observer. When the scientists erased the path information in the present, the particle's behavior in the past changed. It retroactively switched from being a particle to being a wave. The decision made in the now reached back through time and rewrote the history of the particle. Let that sink in. The particle did not have a defined past until the future measurement determined it. Now translate this from the language of subatomic particles to the language of your life. This is not just happening in a lab. It is happening in your neurology. The universe works like a video game engine. In a game, the computer does not render the entire world at once. That would crash the system. It only renders what is on your screen right now. The room behind you, the street you grew up on, the trauma you suffered 10 years ago. In the eyes of the quantum universe, these are just compressed data files. They are zipped. They do not exist as physical realities until you open them. When you remember the past, you are not retrieving a file from a dusty cabinet. You're actively performing a quantum measurement. You are the detector in the experiment. By recalling a memory, you are collapsing a wave function of infinite possibilities down to a single hardened event. And here's the terrifying implication. The way you observe it, your emotional state, your bias, your fear, determines how that past event crystallizes. If you observe your past with the heavy, dense frequency of victimhood, you are retroactively collapsing the wave function into a narrative of pain. You are sending a signal back in time that says, solidify this as trauma. You are using the delayed choice mechanism to ensure that your past remains a prison. Do you feel that vertigo? That is the ground of objective reality dissolving beneath your feet. It is a necessary disorientation. Because if the past is fluid, then the chains binding you to your old self are not made of iron, they are made of smoke. You have been guarding a jail cell that isn't locked. You have been rewriting the same tragedy every morning, thinking you're just reading the script. The past is waiting for your permission to change. But to give that permission, we must understand the mechanism of how your brain, the ultimate quantum eraser, keeps you trapped in the loop. We have established that the universe waits for an observer to define history. Now we must look at the machine that is doing the observing. You. Specifically, the emotional engine sitting in the center of your chest. You think your memory is a video library. You believe that when you recall a childhood trauma or a painful breakup, you are walking into a room, taking a DVD off the shelf, and watching a recording that was burned onto the disk years ago. This is the archive fallacy. Neuroscience and quantum mechanics are beginning to converge on a different truth. You do not have a hard drive in your brain. You have a reconstruction engine. Every time you remember something, you are not retrieving it. You are rebuilding it from scratch. You are pulling the raw quantum data, the zipped file, and rendering it through the lens of your current emotional state. Here is the retro-causal mechanism in plain sight. The emotion you feel right now is the instruction code for how the past is reconstructed. If you are angry today, your brain will scan the quantum probability field of your past and selectively collapse only the events that justify your anger. It will literally highlight the insults, the failures, and the betrayals. It will literally gray out the moments of joy or neutrality. You are not remembering a sad past. You are using your present sadness to infect your timeline backwards. You are sending a retro-causal signal that says, "Make the past match my current vibration." Consider the observer effect on trauma. When you relive a painful moment, you are not just a spectator. You are the scientist in the lab with the quantum eraser. By pouring fresh adrenaline and cortisol into that memory, you are effectively hitting the save button on the trauma. You are re-encoding the event with a heavier, denser frequency. This explains why people with depression often report that their entire life feels like a waste, even if they had happy childhoods. It is not that they have forgotten the happiness. It is that their current low frequency has traveled back in time and collapsed the wave function of their childhood into a depressed mode. They have retroactively edited the color grading of their own movie. The viscosity of time is an illusion created by your emotional repetition. The reason your past feels solid, like it cannot be changed, is because you keep observing it from the exact same emotional set point. You wake up every day, reset your emotional baseline to anxious or resentful, and then look at your history. Naturally, the history looks exactly the same as it did yesterday. You are like a man looking at a statue in a dark room with a flashlight. You only shine the light on the statue's ugly features day after day. You scream, "Why is this statue so ugly?" unaware that the statue is actually a shape-shifting quantum cloud. It is only ugly because that is where you are pointing the light. This is the feedback loop. The snake eating its own tail, the Ouroboros. Your past creates your present mood, and your present mood reconstructs your past to justify itself. This is how the Matrix keeps you trapped in a loop of karma. Karma is not a mystical punishment system. Karma is simply the inertia of your observation. It is the momentum of a mind that refuses to change its frequency, and therefore keeps recreating the same history over and over again. But if the mechanism works this way, then the reverse is also true. If you can change the frequency of the observer, if you can alter your state of being in the now, you can force the wave function of the past to collapse into a new pattern. You can literally hack the timeline. You have likely felt this before in rare moments of high vibration or love. Suddenly, the worst things that happened to you don't feel like tragedies anymore. They feel like necessary lessons. That isn't just a change of perspective. That is a timeline shift. You changed the observer, and the data changed to match. The trap is that the system, the biological and social matrix, is designed to keep your frequency low and stable. It wants you to be a predictable observer. It wants your past to be a cage so that your future is just a larger cell.
If you have followed the logic this far, a terrifying question should be forming in your mind. If the past is fluid, and if we have the power to rewrite it by changing our observation, why is it so difficult to do? Why do we naturally drift back into memories of shame, regret, and trauma? Why does the radio of our mind seem stuck on a frequency of despair? This is not a design flaw. It is a feature. This is the memory trap. You must understand that the matrix, or what ancient Gnostics called the archons, runs on energy. Robert Monroe called it louche. It is the energetic byproduct of intense human emotion, specifically fear, guilt, and longing. To a parasitic system, a liberated human who lives in the eternal now is useless. You provide no food, but a human trapped in a loop of regretting the past and fearing the future, that is a perpetual motion machine of energy. The system needs your past to be solid. It needs your history to be a heavy anchor that prevents you from rising. Think about the guardians mentioned in the Thoth prophecies. These are not just mythological figures. They are metaphors for the biological limiters in your brain. Your amygdala is wired to prioritize danger. It holds on to negative memories with a grip 10 times stronger than positive ones. This is the survival instinct gone wrong. In the quantum sense, your biology is programmed to be a pessimistic observer. It actively scans for trauma to keep the timeline collapsed into a predictable, safe, low-vibration cage. Notice the heaviness in your body when you try to forgive yourself or someone else. Feel that physical resistance, that tightness in the solar plexus. That is the gravitational pull of the matrix. It is the system fighting to maintain timeline fidelity. When you start to heal, when you start to view your past with compassion instead of judgment, you are literally threatening the structural integrity of the simulation that has been built around you. You are causing a glitch. The people around you, who are often unconscious agents of the matrix, will suddenly try to remind you of who you used to be. They will bring up old mistakes. They will try to pull you back into the old story. This is karmic drag. Karma is not a mystical debt you are paying off. Karma is simply the momentum of the pendulum. It is the tendency of the wave function to collapse in the same way it did yesterday, because that is the path of least resistance. You are not being punished for your sins. You are being farmed for your consistency. The trap is intricate. They convince you that analyzing your past is the way to fix it, so you spend years in therapy, talking about the trauma, re-observing it, adding more detail to it, making it more real. You think you are digging your way out, but you are just digging the hole deeper. You are giving the past more energy, more mass, making it harder to shift. To escape, you must do the one thing the system fears most. You must stop caring about the story. You must withdraw your attention from the old timeline entirely. You must starve the ghost.
The theory ends here. Now we enter the laboratory of your own mind. If you wish to escape the loop, you must become an alchemist of time. You must learn to use the 0 point, the stillness between heartbeats where the timeline is malleable. The technique I am about to give you is ancient. The mystics called it revision. The scientists call it retroactive event determination. I call it the quantum overwrite. This is not about pretending the past didn't happen. It is about destroying the information path that keeps the trauma active. Remember the experiment. When the path information was erased, the particle changed its history. You are going to do exactly the same thing. Here is the protocol. It must be performed at night, in the hypnagogic state, that drift between wakefulness and sleep. This is when your brain waves slow to theta, the frequency of the programming language of the matrix. Step 1. The review. As you lie in bed, play the movie of your day backwards. Do not judge it, just watch it. You will inevitably hit a scene that causes a somatic reaction, a spike of anxiety, a pang of regret, a moment where you felt small. Stop the tape there. That is the glitch. That is the moment where the wave function collapsed into a negative timeline. Step 2. The erasure. Do not accept that scene as final. In your mind's eye, rewind the tape to just before that moment occurred. Now, replay the scene, but this time, rewrite the script. If you received bad news, imagine receiving good news. If you had an argument, imagine the conversation ending in understanding. If you felt lonely, imagine a presence of deep connection. Step 3. The encoding. This is the critical step. You cannot just see it, you must feel it. Your brain does not know the difference between a physical event and a vivid visualization. By generating the emotion of relief or joy in that reimagined moment, you are creating a new measurement. You are telling the quantum field, this is what happened. Loop this new scene over and over until it feels real, until your body relaxes, until the memory of the old trauma feels distant and foggy, like a dream you are waking up from. What are you doing physically? You are scrambling the path information. You are refusing to observe the timeline where you were a victim. By going to sleep in the frequency of the wish fulfilled, you interrupt the feedback loop. You stop the signal of pain from traveling back in time. Let that sink in. You are not changing the external world immediately. You are changing the seed of the world. When you wake up tomorrow, you will notice a shift. The heavy feeling will be gone. People involved in that negative timeline will react to you differently, often without knowing why. Why? Because you shifted the track. You are no longer on the timeline where the argument solidified. You are on the timeline where it was resolved. This requires discipline. The archons of your biology will fight you. They will scream, "But that's lying. That's not what happened." You must look that voice in the eye and say, "I am the observer. What I observe is the truth." Never go to sleep with a heavy heart. To do so is to cement the prison walls for another 24 hours. Clean your timeline every night. Collapse the wave function into light before you drift into the void. This is how you reclaim your sovereignty.
We have dissected the physics of your prison. We have handed you the keys to the lock, but the final door,
You must push that open yourself. The ultimate deception of the Matrix is the belief that you are a character traveling through time, that you are a small, fragile vessel floating down a river called history, helpless against the current. This is the lie that keeps you small. The truth, the one they hid in the forbidden physics, is that you are not in the river. You are the riverbed. You are the water. You are the banks. Time is not happening to you. Time is happening through you. Itzhak Bentov called this the shift into vertical time. The linear mind moves horizontally, from the regret of yesterday to the anxiety of tomorrow. That is the axis of decay. That is where your body ages and your soul withers. But the awakened spirit moves vertically. It dives deep into the now moment. In this vertical depth, there is no past to haunt you and no future to fear. There is only the infinite potential of the present. This is the still point where the pendulum stops swinging. This is where you become the architect. When you stop reacting to the past and start curating your vibration in the present, you become invisible to the parasites. They cannot feed on a being who refuses to suffer for things that no longer exist. You become a glitch they cannot patch, a frequency they cannot track. So here is your choice. You can click away from this video and return to the comfortable numbness of linear time. You can let the world tell you who you were yesterday and who you will be tomorrow. You can remain a victim of the script. Or you can decide right now to shatter the clock. You can claim your sovereignty as the quantum observer. You can rewrite the code. The past is not a life sentence. It is a draft, and you are holding the eraser. Do not just watch this, become it. The timeline splits here. Which version of you is walking away from this screen? The choice is yours.